All right, chapter 10 of Genesis. So this is getting really good as we're looking at now this false priesthood that has happened. Things are emerging. Shem and Ham and Japheth all were blessed or cursed in Ham's instance. The descendants of Canaan, Ham's son, would be the servants of the descendants of Japheth and Shem as well. So a little interesting, if you want, almost patriarchal blessing in there or prophecy. So chapter 10, the descendants of Noah are Japheth, whose descendants are Gentiles, Ham, whose descendants include the Canaanites, and Shem, of whom came Peleg, in whose days the earth was divided. So this is going to be some fun stuff. We get to learn a little bit more about how does this come together? How does, where does this lead the generations of people, basically? So some pretty interesting things we get to learn. Verse 1, now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem and Ham and Japheth. And unto them were sons born after the flood. So this is where they say that actually the Gentiles, which Bible Dictionary has the word Gentiles in it, were coming from. The sons of Japheth were Gomer and Magog and Madai and Javan and Tubal and Meshech and Tiras. Now Tubal, of course, Tubal-Cain was before the flood, was another name that has continued on. The names Magog and Javan are actually in the Bible dictionary. So if you want to understand those ones as well, they're there. Verse 3, the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan were Javan, of course, in the Bible dictionary, Elisha and Tarshish and Kittim and Dodanimin. Elisha and Chittim are both in the Bible dictionary as well, if you want to look those up to understand those names so better. Verse 5, by these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue, after their families, in their nations. So Bible dictionary, isles is in there as well. So these are, remember, we're talking about this, the sons of Japheth went on the isles, the different islands of the Gentiles. They spread out for the Gentile nations. So we know the Gentile nations are islands, the Philippines, the Pacific Islands area. We consider Europe more the Gentile areas, the North American, South American continents as well, possibly in there, the Gentile nations that we would know of today, basically, but that's kind of where they started and kind of moved off from there. And verse 6 now, we get into the sons of Ham was Cush, Mizraim, and Phut, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush was Seba, Havilah, and Sabta, and Ramah, and Sabteka, and the sons of Ramah, Sheba, and Dedan. A lot of those, Cush, Mizraim, Canaan, Sheba, all those are actually in the Bible dictionary, so you can look those up as well. Verse 8, and Cush begat Nimrod. So remember, Cush was the oldest son of Ham, even though Canaan was the one that was cursed. He was one of the younger sons of Ham. Cush begat Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one in the earth. So there's a whole lot of stuff about Nimrod that's in the ancient writings. It's pretty fascinating. Here is actually some stuff from the book In Search of the Historic Nimrod by Bruce Warren that is really interesting. He's a professor of anthropology at Brigham Young. Let's see, he says, one of the most enigmatic personages in the book of Genesis is Nimrod, son of Cush and grandson of Ham, the mighty hunter before the Lord. He is said to have built the towns of Babel, Erech, and Akkad in the land of Shinar or Sumer in southern Mesopotamia, and also the northern Mesopotamian cities of Nineveh, Rehoboth, Bothar, Kala, and Rezin. So the plain of Shinar is also the site of the building of the Tower of Babel. Jewish tradition makes Nimrod the first king of Babel, or Babylon, and credits him with the building of the great tower for the purpose of avenging himself on God. In this connection, we note that the Nimrod of Greek mythology built the tower for the use of the Titans in their attack on the gods atop Mount Olympus. So using this idea, the Greeks use this idea that Nimrod wanted to get to heaven without going through God's plan. Basically, he wanted to usurp him. There's a lot of legends too that also the reason of the Great Tower was so it could be a place of refuge that would be so high that it was higher than the floods of Noah, so that they could, if the floods ever happened again, they could basically climb up to this tower and be above it and not have to be destroyed by God. So they were getting around using God. They were usurping God and getting rid of God and putting substitutes in that they built themselves, basically. Late traditions make Nimrod not only the first king and founder of Babylon, but also associate him with gaining power by magical means and of teaching men to kill and eat the flesh of animals. The same stories consider him to be a giant. Indeed, the Syriac of Genesis 10:89 calls Nimrod a warlike giant, while the LXX renders the Hebrew Gibber, or King James Version mighty, of Genesis 10:8 as gigas, or giant. Okay. Nimrod's prowess as a hunter is a subject of discussion in Jewish traditions. It is said that he possessed a magic power that derived from the garments of Adam and Eve. These Ham had stolen out of the ark and passed down to his son Cush and to Nimrod. Remember the garments and things? Animals would voluntarily lie down before the great hunter when he was arrayed in these garments. His irresistible power also brought men to accept him as king. So he's putting himself up as, I am the true ruler, even though a prophet or the authority through the priesthood should be the true ruler, but he put himself up as the true ruler and against God. Numerous attempts have been made to identify Nimrod with historical or legendary figures from Mesopotamia. Boscawen tied the biblical account to a Babylonian story of a wicked king who gathered his people atop a mound, the tower, and caused them to sin before the gods. Other scholars, noting that Nimrod's father was Cush, speculated that Nimrod was the Bible's way of representing the Kassite or Cushite invaders of the late Bronze Era, who took Babylon and ruled for a period of 4 centuries. Still, others have sought to identify Nimrod with one of the early rulers of Mesopotamia, such as the great Sargon of Akkad. Indeed, Akkad, Agade, the Akkad of King James Version, is one of the cities whose building is credited to Nimrod. Sargon is known from later Mesopotamian history as the monarch who unified all of Mesopotamia and sedentarized the region of Subartu. For his actions in settling the Domads, he suffered famine at the hands of the god Marduk. That the purpose of the tower and city of Babel was to centralize power and to do away with nomadism is hinted at in the Bible, Genesis 11:4. The punishment inflicted upon the builders by God is also mentioned. Thus, there are superficial reasons to accept the identification of Nimrod with Sargon. This is reinforced by the fact that Sargon's name, the Akkadian Shamakin, is a mere title meaning legitimate king. His real name is unknown to us. Apollodorus identified Nimrod with the Nimis of the classical historians. Just as Nimrod is said in Jewish tradition to have lived in the time of Abraham, so too Nittis is placed in the time of Abraham by Eusebius, Paulus Orosius, and later by Syncelus. Orosius, the 5th century AD, made Nimis the grandson of Nimrod and credits Ninus, not Nimrod, with the building of Babylon. Ninus was the son of Belus, or Bel, king of Assyria. Like Nimrod, he is said to have found various cities, notably Nineveh, Assyrian Ninua, thus resembling Greek Ninus. And with the earliest conquest of Ai, the people of the East, his wife, sometimes called his mother, evidently confusing Ninus with his son Ninias, was Semiramis, who reigned as queen after his death. Continuing Ninus's military conquests, she is said to have built or restored the city of Babylon with its hanging gardens, elsewhere attributed to Nebuchadnezzar, and to have constructed in its center a great temple to Belus. This would have been a temple tower or ziggurat, hence similar to the Tower of Babel. Semiramis, however, appears to be Semuramat, the Babylonian consort of the Assyrian king Shamshi-Adad V. After her husband's death, she was regent for her son, the boy king Adad-nirari. He reigned in 810 to 783 BC, late enough in the historical development of Israel to preclude identifying him with the Nimrod of great antiquity. It is possible, however, that Adad-nirari was denominated Ninus by the Greeks because of his capital, Nineveh. Some scholars, while continuing to identify Semiramis with Samurat, have looked to the Assyrian king Tukulti-Ninurta, who was 1244 to 1208 BC, as the source of the Ninus legend. Spazer, who was the first to do so, it seems more likely, however, that it was this king's namesake, the god Ninurta, Tinder, the form Nimrod, who was the prototype for Nimrod. Ninurta was the Babylonian and Assyrian war god, credited with teaching the people arts, crafts, and sciences, just as Nimrod is said by Epiphanius to have established the sciences of magic and astronomy. The Asher text of the famous battle with the enemy demon Zu, it is Ninurta who prevails. The hero, however, goes Tinder other names in different versions. The Susa text has Ningirsti. In a hymn of Ashurbanipal of Assyria, it is Marduk, the chief god at Babylon, while in the Sumerian version, it is Lugabanda who defeats Zu. The latter two names represent individuals who could be readily identified with Nimrod. The Akkadian name Marduk derives from the Sumerian Mar-Utu, a hunter god. He is said to have led a revolt of the gods against his parents, after which he was enthroned as king of the gods. In Babylonian tradition, it was he who founded Babylon, Babalu, or Gate of the Gods. His temple at Babylon bore the name Sagila, or house that lifts up the head, and the tower associated with it was called in Sumerian Etemenakni, house of the foundation of the heaven and earth. The similarity to the Tower of Babel is evident. The theme of the rebellious hunter who wanted to ascend to the top of heaven fits the Nimrod story quite well. Moreover, it would have been very natural for the Jews to call Marduk, who was also the Babylonian god of war, by the name Nimrod. Both would probably have been perceived as containing the Hebrew root MRD, meaning to rebel. Other ancient Near Eastern traditions would seem to connect Nimrod with the rebellious hunter god. For example, we have the Hittite Kumarbi, who had a stone giant named Ulekumi, from whose head he intended to launch an attack on the 70 gods of heaven. Much like the Greek Nimrod in Jewish tradition, the angel Shemhazai, one of the leaders in the rebellion against God, repented of his misdeed and hung himself upside down in the sky as the constellation called Orion by the Greeks. Orion, it will be recalled, being both a giant and hunter, thus fits the description of Nimrod. Indeed, the 7th century AD Chronicon Pascale indicates that Nimrod, after his death, was deified in the constellation called Orion by the Greeks, but Nimrod by the Persians. The Babylonian war hunter god Marduk also went under the name Bel, which recalls the Greek tradition that Nintus was the son of Belus. Marduk was in effect the real king of Babylon, and all properties were in early times subject to control by his priests. Even foreign conquerors such as the Assyrian and Persian kings had to be recognized by Marduk as his earthly representatives by grasping the horns of Bel. It is in this light that we must read the words of Isaiah chapter 14 addressed to the king of Babylon, who ruled the nations. Fallen from heaven, he is identified with the planet Ventus. His goal had been to ascend to heaven, to exalt his throne above the stars, to sit on the holy mountain, or the tower maybe, and to be like God. During the course of his reign, he had brought fear and destruction to the nations. The picture painted by Isaiah fits both the story of Marduk and the Nimrod traditions. As noted above, both Marduk and Ninurta have been depicted as the god hero who defeated the demon Zu. Another hero king credited with the defeat of Zu is the god Lugalbanda, a shepherd, who ruled 1200 years in the city of Uruk, according to the Sumerian king list. Uruk is the Erech of the Bible, one of the cities built by Nimrod. Its most famous king was the son of Lugalbanda, one Gilgamesh, who considered his father to be divine. So Lugalbanda's reign of 2800 BC would place him in the right time period for identification with Nimrod. Lugabanda is the first king on the Sumerian king list to have the element Lugal in his name. The meaning great man recalls Nimrod's title of Gibob, or great mighty one. Demiel and Poplica identified Nimrod with Lugalbanda. So realizing that there's tons of ancient traditions of this great king, god, warrior, hunter type person, this warrior king that was amazing, that defeated demons, that could defeat great stuff, that had supernatural powers, and could do all these great things, and basically pushed God out and had everybody worship him. He became the God of this world in a way and kind of pulled the nations together. Okay, there's a lot of, you got to realize after Noah and the people, they started spreading out. They wanted to venture, they wanted to travel, they wanted to go be the king of their own lands. And Nimrod didn't want that, because if all of your subjects leave, you have no kingdom. So he tried to rein them back in, partially building the tower so they could see it, they could come back to his kingdom, pulling this together. There's tons of ancient writings that go around this, and this guy is talking about how a lot of them really connect and pull in with Nimrod, the great descendant of Ham, as we see here. So tons more that goes on here. Of interest is the fact that Poplica also renders the name Lugabanda as Lugamarda, with which Carlton found agreement. The element Lugal, great man or king, alternates in Sumerian titles with N, which is lord or governor. Consequently, Lugamarda is likely to be the same as Endmarda, the god of Marda. The name Nimrod could derive from Enmarda, or even from its alternate reading, Nimmarad, with assimilation of the second N, as would occur in Hebrew before consonant. In any event, none of these appear to be personal names, but rather the titles of royalty or divinity. So if you look at this, the idea that Nimrod wasn't just a person, but his name, he was such a great person, his name became the name of the great person, like kings, basically. He became a title, in essence, is what this is talking about here. So tremendous information that we learn from this, which is really, really neat. So let's go in and go into this a little bit more, understanding this a little bit more. So we're on verse 9. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. So this was Hugh Nibley said this in the chapter, The Arrow, the Hunter, and the State, in his book, The Ancient State. It's really good. He says, the vague before the Lord of the King James Version conceals the true meaning rendered against the Lord by the rabbinical and early Christian writers on this subject. See Karl Persendan's Nimrod. So in this, he's talking about how basically it doesn't mean that he's a mighty hunter before the Lord, meaning that the Lord approves of him, but he is against the Lord, is what it really is translated to be is what the early Christian writers and early Jewish writers say. That's what it actually is supposed to mean. It was adjusted in the King James Version as they translated it to English. But it means he was against the Lord, basically. Now in verse 10, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel and Erech and Akkad and Calneh and the land of Shinar. And if you remember, we just went into this and talked about this in understanding him better. So let me see, I think I had some stuff on this as well. So Bible Dictionary, Shinar is in the Bible Dictionary, Assyria is in there as well. The book of Jubilee says this, for this reason, the whole land of Shinar is called Babel, because the Lord did there confound all the languages of the children of men, and from thence they were dispersed into their cities. So we know that there's another great thing that's going to happen around the Tower of Babel, or this land of Babel, which is the land of Shinar as well, and Babel is in there. Verse 11, out of that land went forth Ashur, and buildeth Nineveh, and the city Rehoboth, and Calah. Now, Rehoboth is in the Bible Dictionary, if you want to look that up for some more information. And Rezin, between Nineveh and Calah, the same is a great city. And Mizraim begat Ludim, and Anamim, and Lehabim, and Naphutim. So now, verse 13, we're switching from talking about the names of cities to the names of people again. Remember, Mizraim is in the Bible Dictionary. And it goes through these, and Pathruzim and Kelushim, out of whom came Philistim, which is the Philistines. Remember, and Canaan begat Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth. Now, Sidon and Heth are both in the Bible Dictionary. You can look those up. And verse 16, and the Jebusite and the Amorite and the Girgasite. Okay, Girgasite is in Bible Dictionary too. You can look that up. So if you haven't read your Bible Dictionary, you probably should. There's some fascinating stuff there. Verse 17, and the Hivite and the Archite and the Sinite. So these are the groups that are coming off of the descendants of Canaan, who's the descendant of Ham, remember. Verse 18, the Arvite, and the Zemarite, and the Hamathite, afterward were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad. And the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon, as thou comest to Gerar unto Gaza, as thou goest unto Sodom and Gomorrah, and Admah and Zeboim, even unto Lasha. So this is giving us kind of a boundary of where they are. So Bible Dictionary, Sidon, Gerar, Gaza, Gomorrah, and Zeboim is actually, all of those are in the Bible Dictionary. So if you want to understand more about the geography of where the descendants of Canaan lived, that will give you some examples and ideas to look at, basically. So I'm not going to spoil that little tidbit for you. Go look them up in the Bible Dictionary. Some fun stuff. Now we get verse 21, unto Shem. So now this is Shem. So Japheth and Ham, we've looked at their descendants. Now this is Shem. Unto Shem, also the father of all the children of Eber. So remember, Shem is in the Bible Dictionary. The brother of Japheth, the elder, even to him were children born. The children of Shem were Elam and Ashur and Arphaxad and Lud and Aram. Now, Elam and Aram are in the Bible Dictionary. You can look those ones up as well. Verse 23, the children of Aram was Uz and Hul, Gether and Mash. Verse 24, and Araxphad begat Salah, and Salah begat Eber, which Eber is in the Bible Dictionary. We talked about that. And unto Eber were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. So Peleg is actually in the Bible Dictionary. You can look him up as well. So this is really interesting because he was alive during the confounding of the languages when the earth was divided. Not that the earth went through tectonic divisions with Peleg, but the earth was divided. The language confounding was happening at this point. So Peleg was around at this time. Could he have known the brother of Jared, Mahamre Moriankamer, who was there at that same time as well? So we're now getting to the story that's in the Book of Mormon. This is the time frame. This is the time frame of when the brother of Jared's story is. Okay, so it's back in these times. We're talking about the descendants of Noah, and his three sons, and the brother of Jared fits in there. Could Mahamre Moriankamer, who Joseph had told us was the name of the brother of Jared, could Jared and his brother basically have known some of these people that we're learning about in the Old Testament? Maybe they're descended from some of them somewhere. They don't tell us in the Old Testament, but there's obviously more to the genealogy than just what we're getting. And then verse 26, and Joktan began Alamad and Shepha, and so lots of names. Verse 28, Obal, Abimelech, and Sheba. Sheba is, of course, verse 25, you can look up Joktan, which is Arabia, okay, from him. And then Sheba is in the Bible Dictionary. Arabia is in the Bible Dictionary as well. Verse 29, and Ophir, who's in the Bible Dictionary, and Havilah and Jobab, these were the sons of Joktan. Their dwelling was from Mesha, as thou goest unto Sephar, a mount of the east. These are the sons of Shem and their families after their tongue and their lands and their nations. These are the families of the sons of Noah after their generations, the nations. And by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. So this is now just kind of getting an idea of, okay, these guys went over here, these guys went over here, here's where they went, to just start to get you an understanding of how this is moving and where we kind of trace things back basically to them to an extent. So pretty interesting stuff that we have, little confusing, but just important to realize that there's different blessings, different things that happen because of this. And in a way, we might be able to see some ideas of how that is translating into the world that we know today. So some fascinating things to look at. Thanks. We'll see you in the next chapter, chapter 11.